Welcome to Cozy Dreams, where we listen, we relax, and we get sleepy. My name is Brian. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. In this episode, we've stitched together some of our favorite autumn stories for you all to enjoy, with a continuous backdrop of soothing rain sounds to accompany each tale. They're all stories that I've read, meaning you won't be disrupted by a change of voice at any point. So, settle in and prepare for some autumnal coziness and a good night's rest. The brittle leaves crunch underfoot as you walk down the country lane. Up ahead, you see a sign pointing to your destination. It reads, Gloomy Gourd's Pumpkin Patch, and it's carved into a hunk of wood, hung on an old, sun-bleached wooden gate. Far in the distance, forested mountains are covered in a blanket of autumn's favorite colors. The land where you are now is much flatter, though, ideal for growing pumpkins. The skyline is a gentle blue, scattered with fluffy, pillowy clouds. Looking down, you spot a perfect maple leaf, dropped here by the red and yellow tree looming next to you. You bend down and carefully pick it up by its stem. Then, you hold the leaf up to the sun's soft light and admire the precision of its form. Unlike the other leaves around it, this one is still firm, but not yet crisp, retaining some moisture from its life on the tree. It seems too beautiful to let go, you think, so you carefully put it into your satchel as a keepsake. As you walk towards the gate, a gentle breeze blows past you. You can feel it through the fabric of your top, so you pull your thin wool scarf a little tighter around you to stay warm. The gate is secured with a metal closure. You slide your thumb under it and raise it gently. It rattles and creaks, showing its age. The gate has probably been standing here on this farm for decades, you think. You pull the latch down to close it behind you. As you turn around, the warm aroma of ripe pumpkins and sweet, crisp apples fills your nose. The pumpkin patch begins with a short dirt pathway bordered by several tall, slender trees. Leaves of red, yellow, brown, and orange are scattered across the beige trail. Some crunch beneath your shoes, while others are still too soft to make a sound. You approach a small wooden booth where you can purchase a ticket to visit the pumpkin patch. There's a woman sitting here, welcoming visitors. You greet each other kindly and exchange a few words. Then, you pull out the appropriate amount of cash from your pocket and hand it over to her. She smiles, clinks open the metal money box, and hands you a ticket. You rub your fingertips back and forth on the papery ticket for a moment and turn it over once or twice before slipping it into your pocket. As you pass the booth, more of the pumpkin patch reveals itself. From where you're standing, you can see gourds of many sizes and colors. Small orange pie pumpkins and the pale, eerie ghost pumpkins catch your eye. You admire the uniqueness of the white ones, with their thick, black stem handles and glossy sides. You wonder how they might taste. Bitter or sweet, you muse to yourself. It's been a while since you last came to the patch. You almost forgot about all the colors, shapes, and sizes that Mother Nature has to offer. Around you are green, speckled, yellow, and even multicolored varieties. As you glance around, you notice that aside from the pumpkins, there are many more things to see at this patch. Your gaze lands on a white barn with a black roof nearby, almost mimicking the look of the ghost pumpkins. You can also see signs for a corn maze, an apple orchard, hay rides, and a bonfire. There's even an especially cozy area where a vendor is selling treats and warm beverages. You'll definitely make a stop there later, you decide. To your right, you find a big map displayed on a wooden signpost. You trace your fingers over the map to see how to get to the apple orchard, making a mental note of the general layout. You carry on towards the orchard in search of the perfect, crisp, red apple. For a little while, you follow a small path that is lined on either side with displays of painted pumpkins, festive decorations, and large hay bales. Looking around, you can tell that it's a rather quiet day at the pumpkin patch. Some families and groups are here, but it's far from crowded. It promises to be a peaceful outing, and that makes you happy. Before long, you arrive at the orchard and notice that it's quite small, with just a dozen or so trees. Each one, however, is dripping with plump ruby apples and vibrant green leaves. Both are also scattered across the faded grass below the trees. A gentle breeze moves through the orchard, and you feel the crisp air brush across your arms. Although you're wearing a warm cardigan and scarf, the light wind still finds your skin in the little spaces between the knitted stitches. But with the soft autumn sun above and the warmth of the wall, you feel tremendously cozy and comfortable. As you walk slowly through the orchard, you see a gleaming red apple fall from a tree in front of you. It bounces from its branch into a pile of leaves. Curious, you make your way over to it. Leaves rustle around your hand as you reach into the pile to pick up the apple. It feels nice and firm in your palm as you turn it around, inspecting it for imperfections. But the fruit is glossy, smooth, and ripe. This particular apple must have been meant for you. Making your way out of the orchard along another dirt path, you soon come to a stack of wooden signs pointing in different directions. One of them reads, "Candied apples," with a large arrow. You'd planned to eat a plain, no-frills apple, but now your senses are tingling. With your fruit in hand, you follow the sign. After a minute or two, you come to the booth. The fruit stand offers freshly prepared candied and caramel apples with a variety of toppings. But there's also the option to make one yourself. After speaking with the laid-back farmer working in the booth, he hands you a pointed stick made of wood. You take it and carefully poke it through the bottom of the fruit into the core. When you feel the apple is resting firmly on the stick, you slowly dip it into a rich caramel sauce. The scent of smoky, molten sugar reaches your nose, and the sticky, hot liquid soon coats the skin of the fruit. Your mouth waters with delight at the thought of this special treat. As a final touch, you roll the apple over in a bed of chopped peanuts. Now, it's ready, you think. You thank the farmer for helping you with the apple. Then, you turn away and head for the main pumpkin patch. A pair of kids holding hands dart past you, eager for their turn to make candied apples. Soon, you come to a wooden bench, which looks like a lovely place to relax while you enjoy your treat. It creaks when you sit down, but is comfortable beneath you. From here, you have a beautiful view over the patch. There's a straw scarecrow dressed in linen overalls, surrounded by hundreds of orange pumpkins, some big, others small. Glancing down at the caramel apple in your hand, you turn it slowly to admire your work. It's shiny and reflects the soft afternoon light and a single branch of the maple tree behind you. You then bring it up to your mouth, carefully sinking your teeth into its sweetness. It tastes just as good as you remember. You spend some time sitting on the bench, and admiring the kingdom of pumpkins in front of you. The mountains in the distance collide with an uneven line of ripe orange gourds. From this perspective, it looks as though a jumble of curly and straight stems are poking up into the skyline. The whole place smells of autumn. There are hints of cinnamon and apples, and the earthy aromas of caramel and pumpkin spice. They mix with notes of fallen leaves, rich soil, and straw. Everything about this moment makes you feel warm and cozy. You'd like to go and pick a pumpkin to take home, but you decide to wait a while longer. You don't want to carry around a heavy gourd when there's still much to explore here. For now, you just consider what kind of pumpkin would be best to choose. As you continue looking out at the patch, you watch families, couples, and individuals amble through rows of vines and soil. Some take photographs, while others are in search of the perfect orange squash. They bend down, inspecting various pumpkins, with expressions of curiosity dancing across their faces. Some of the visitors pull small red wagons where their children ride, holding their prized pumpkins. Others choose to carry them, tucked under their arms instead. After a few moments, you lift yourself up from the creaky bench and make your way onward towards the black and white barn you noticed earlier. It's just past the apple orchard you've already visited. Instead of retracing your steps to the right, you choose a path heading left. As the day progresses, the breeze grows crisper. You do up another button on your cardigan to stay warm and snug. Walking in the direction of the barn, you notice a few crows soaring through the sky above you, chattering to one another. You look up at the cloudy sky, admiring how the autumnal sun is beginning to fade away. After another left turn, you arrive at the quaint barn. It's situated in the middle of the pumpkin patch, and it seems like a meeting place for the farmers on staff and families and friends visiting the patch today. You see one farmer standing with his foot propped against the side of the barn as he talks to another. Every so often, both sip from steaming mugs held between their palms. One man is dressed in loose overalls and a brown plaid shirt. The other is wearing blue jeans with a simple shirt tucked in at the waist. Both have on comfy-looking boots. Together, they laugh and chat away, enjoying their warm drinks. The relaxing sound of leaves fluttering in a nearby tree catches your attention. You turn and look just in time to see that some have dropped, twirling and dancing together before coming to rest comfortably on the grass. A few others are tossed up by the breeze and carried in the direction of the barn, drawing your gaze with them. Out of the corner of your eye, you notice a group of horses. They're standing inside of an unpainted picket fence, grazing quietly. You watch them as they take slow, methodical bites of grass and munch contentedly. This makes you smile, and you spend a few minutes admiring them from a distance. One horse is a chocolatey brown color with a mane to match. The other is golden brown with a blonde mane. A gust of wind tosses the fine hair of their manes into the air. The horses shake their heads to brush the hair out of their eyes before turning their attention once more to the grass. They truly are majestic creatures, you think. Just then, another farmer comes out from the back of the barn. She begins to brush the chocolatey brown horse, and it seems happy to be receiving this special attention. Thinking it's time to carry on, you leave the horses to their brushing and feeding. All around you, the pumpkin patch is buzzing with activity. You spot a tractor-pulled wagon with hay bales. Families gather one by one for a ride around the farm. You knew these rides were a staple of the pumpkin patch, and you considered going for a ride to feel the crisp October air moving past as you bumped and bounced around the farm. But you decide to leave that activity to the groups waiting now. As families fill the wagon and head out for their ride, you're left alone near the barn. You've got the place almost entirely to yourself. It's so calm, it's no wonder your mind feels serene and relaxed here. A crackling sound drifts towards you from the opposite side of the barn. Remembering the map you saw earlier, you realize that's the direction of the fire pit. You walk over, noticing a bit of smoke rising as the crackling grows louder. You come to a circle made of cut logs with a medium-sized bonfire glowing among rocks in the middle of it. The familiar aroma of burning wood is soothing to your senses. There aren't many things more autumnal than a bonfire, you think. The entryway to this part of the farm is an arch made of cut wood, decorated with dried corn stalks. There are 2 hay bales on either side of the entrance, with a pretty assortment of squash sitting on top of them. You walk through the archway, admiring the attention to detail here. In the pumpkin patch, fairy lights hang above your head, forming a twinkling square around the fire pit. Below the lights are thick, sturdy hay bales and logs for sitting. Over to your right is a covered area where vendors are serving treats and warm drinks to passers-by. The temperature is growing colder as evening approaches, and you believe a hot beverage will warm you right up. You happily walk over to the covered area where the smell of cinnamon and spices fills the air. You can still hear the crackling of the bonfire behind you, setting the perfect mood. The menu has been handwritten on a chalkboard hung on a wooden pillar. You take a moment to read it and see that they serve pumpkin, spice hot chocolate, warm apple cider, and coffee. After a moment of contemplation, you decide on the pumpkin spice hot chocolate. You're at a pumpkin patch after all, and their blend is homemade, you realize. You can already smell the earthy, chocolatey aroma, and it seems to be calling to you. The attendant smiles as he hands you your drink. It's served in a dark green ceramic mug with pumpkins painted on it. You pay and thank him before waving goodbye. Turning around, you glance back at the cozy bonfire. You wish you could have one just like it in your own backyard. You imagine yourself roasting marshmallows over the fire, watching them get crispy on the outside before biting into their gooey texture and sweet flavor. You'd have friends around to tell ghost stories at this time of year. You'd sit by the fire, exchanging tales and staying warm with hot cider and tea. The longer nights would feel shorter in good company. You walk across the grass and take a seat on one of the hay bales. As you move your palm across it, you feel the rough, dry texture of the hay against your skin. You catch a whiff of its dusty scent between notes of the hot chocolate you're holding in your hand. You take a deep breath, feeling quite relaxed. Bringing the mug up to your nose, you smell the delicious aroma more closely. Then, you move the cup down to your mouth and take a generous sip of the pleasantly warm drink. It soothes you from the inside out as you enjoy it. Closing your eyes, you take a moment to focus on your senses. You can hear the rustling of the leaves in the maple and birch trees around you, and the crackling fire next to you. The sense of autumn surround you and you feel completely at peace as the sun fades away and night begins to fall. The fairy lights seem to grow brighter and the fire warmer. It's been a beautiful day, and now you'll sit and sip your hot chocolate, admiring the crispness of the season, the warmth of the bonfire, and the sound of the breeze. Later, you'll find the perfect pumpkin to take home. Who knows? Perhaps you will make that fire pit in your back garden this season after all. Maybe you'll bring friends round for homemade pumpkin pies and stories. It doesn't have to be a dream, you think to yourself, as the atmosphere of this place fills your senses. You hold the warm mug with both hands, content and cozy. You sit and thank Mother Nature for the beauty of autumn and the wonderful day spent here at the pumpkin patch. A young hooded crow perched softly in her nest. She was elegant, with glossy black wings and a black head and beak. The rest of her body was covered in gray feathers. Her back was a dark storm cloud gray, and she had a soft pale gray on her belly. When her feathers caught the sunlight, they occasionally flashed silver and green. This crow lived a long, long time ago. She built her nest on the edge of a golden cliff, overlooking the crystalline blue waters of the sea. She spent her days soaring over the beach, searching for bits of seaweed to add to her nest, or she chatted with the neighboring birds, who made their homes in the different nooks and crannies along the cliff. It was a beautiful, peaceful existence. There was food and water in abundance, and nothing she had to fear. She lived the life she had always known, with the sun and the sea, and the long, lazy days of what felt like eternal summer. But one day, she became aware of a change in the environment. Sitting in her nest, she noticed a subtle shift in the sea air. It was cooler than before, no longer the soft, refreshing summer breeze, but a wind that felt almost cold. The crow shivered in her nest and buried herself in a blanket of moss. The summer was all she had ever known. Now that cooler weather was arriving, she would have to find another place to nest, at least for the next season. She would then come back to the coast the following year for another glorious summer. After tidying up her nest, the crow took flight. She soared up into the air and took one final, lingering look at the sea. Then, with a sigh, she turned her back to the waves and let the wind carry her south across the land. Although she felt wistful at the thought of the beauty she was leaving behind, she knew in her heart it was time for a change. She was young and curious and ready for a new adventure. Perhaps she would find strange, exotic trees, unlike anything she had ever seen before, and lands even more wild and beautiful than her dreams. As she sailed over the dusty earth and golden fields, the crow daydreamed of the places that awaited her. She imagined tall green trees with twisting, spiraling branches, so many of them that they seemed as infinite as the stars. She pictured vast lakes that mirrored the sky and snow-capped mountains lining the horizon, and she saw herself in all these magical landscapes, soaring and diving through the air. As she traveled, she would collect all the beautiful things she found, like feathers, twigs, and flowers. She would use them to create a new nest. It would be a cozy home for the winter months, and a work of art that she could be proud of. The land beneath her looked like a patchwork quilt. Yellow squares of wheat stood next to green fields. These were sometimes divided in the middle by long, straight paths where people and horses traveled. The land was mostly flat, but she could sometimes detect a rising slope or hill. like a ripple in the fabric of the earth. As she moved further inland, there was more variation. The land went up and down in waves, and the trees became greener and denser. From above, these vast canopies looked inviting. They were the perfect place to build a nest. She could choose any one of these branches and make it her home, but it was too early to interrupt her journey. She was settling into a comfortable rhythm, enjoying the warmth of the sun on her wings and the sight of the ever-changing ground beneath her. She would fly further south. After soaring over the forest, the crow began to follow a winding river. It was a shining streak of blue that curved its way past fields and trees, towns and cities. The sight of water was comforting, as it reminded her of the view she had left behind. On the cliff overlooking the ocean, this river was a different shade of blue. It was lighter and more transparent. It moved differently too, flowing slowly but purposefully onward. It was a path for itself across the land. The ocean waves would roll towards the shore over and over again, advancing and then retreating. The land and the ocean were two separate worlds, but this river moved through the earth, living right in the middle of the woods and the hills. She found herself entranced by the river's beauty and fascinated by the life surrounding it. She saw wild horses drinking from the sloping banks and young men splashing in the shallows. There were small wooden boats too, carried along by the currents. Some of the boats were piled high with boxes, and one was even being used to transport furniture. The crow saw a table, some chairs, and cooking pots all tied together and held in place at the back of the boat. It looked as though someone was moving house and taking their belongings with them, but for the crow, it was far easier to leave everything behind and start afresh. She was looking forward to creating her new home and decorating it with the treasures she found along the way. It was a chance to change, and it meant that she could travel easily, with nothing weighing her down. She was completely free. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the river. The crow flew down to the river's edge to drink, sipping some of the clean, fresh water. Then, she decided to find a place to rest for the night, so she could sleep for a while before continuing her journey south. She had never flown for so long without stopping, and she could feel the tiredness spreading right through her, from her head down to the tips of her wings. Next to the river was a small grove of trees, including an ancient olive tree. It wasn't very tall, but it had a thick, sturdy trunk as wide as a boulder and plenty of branches. A couple of birds had already made themselves at home and were resting in the upper branches, their green feathers blending into the leaves. The crow flew up into the tree and began to explore, walking from one branch to another until she found the perfect spot. There was a long, straight branch that stretched out in the direction of the river. From here, she could watch the sunset over the water. It was the closest thing to the view from her old nest on the seaside cliff. She perched on a comfortable part of the branch and gazed at the leaves and the golden light on the water. She found it so calming that she drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep before darkness fell. When she awoke the next morning, the sun was already high in the sky. The light danced and sparkled on the surface of the river between the passing boats. The crow decided to continue following the water to see where all the boats were heading. She stretched her wings and took flight, traveling directly above the river and mirroring every bend and curve. She noticed the occasional building near the banks, modest huts and farmhouses. Soon, one house became two, then three, then a whole street. The change was so gradual, she hardly noticed until she found herself right over the rooftops of an enormous city. She had never seen anything like it. From up here, the city was a vast maze, an intricate labyrinth of rooftops, columns, domes, and towers. The roofs of most of the houses were made of red tiles, a color resembling the sky at sunset. Then there were the golden domes, shining as brightly as the sun itself. The rest of the city was like an ocean of white marble, flowing over the land as far as the eye could see. There were even a few trees in between the buildings. As the crow glided over the rooftops, she spotted huge palm trees swaying in the breeze, and a square lined with purple jacarandas. But although it was beautiful, the crow could not imagine herself living here. She could admire it from a distance, but she would have to keep searching for a quieter, greener space. After one last glance over the glimmering rooftops, she slowly flew away from the city towards the countryside in the south. She had now lost sight of the river, but there were always new things to look at. There were orchards, vineyards, and fields where sheep and cattle grazed. It may not have rivaled the splendor of the city, but she felt more at home here. Any of these trees would make the perfect place for a nest. But she wanted to travel just a little bit further to see what lay beyond the horizon. As the day went on, the crow began to feel tired and thirsty. She had left the river far behind, and there was no sign of a lake or pond, so she would have to find another source of water to quench her thirst. She flew down and landed on the roof of a country house directly below her. It was a humble home, surrounded by a vast garden filled with cypress trees and acres of vineyard. Looking closer, she noticed rows of potted plants lined up by the walls of the house. They all looked lush, green, and healthy, even though, from the look of the dusty earth, it had not rained in a while. She couldn't see any water, but it had to be there somewhere, if only she knew where to look. Built into the garden wall was a marble basin with a sculpture of a lion's head at the center. The crow flew over and perched on the edge of the basin. It was damp, but empty. There was a hole in the stone lion's mouth, so it must have been some kind of fountain. But there was no button to press and no tap to turn. She could cool her feet walking across the damp stone, but she couldn't drink. And in this moment, that was all she could think about. The simple pleasure of a sip of water. She was just about to give up and fly away when she spotted something. In the corner of the garden, almost hidden by the shade of a magnolia tree, was a wooden table, and right there, in the middle of the table, was a large terracotta jug. The crow flew across the garden and landed on the table before hopping up to the edge of the jug. She peered inside and caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the water. At last, she had found something to drink, but the crow's joy quickly turned to disappointment. The jug was only half full, and the neck and opening were narrow. They were large enough for a sparrow to enter, but not a crow. She could see the water, but she couldn't drink it. Her first thought was to push the jug over, but as she tapped it with her beak, she realized that it was far too heavy to move. She would exhaust her strength and make herself even more thirsty in the process. Even if she did succeed in pushing it over, the water would be wasted. It would pour out over the table and onto the ground in a matter of seconds. Then another idea came to her. It was pure inspiration, appearing out of nowhere, like a flash of light. If she could not reach the water, she would make the water come to her, not with force, but with intelligence. There was a small, round pebble on the ground near the table. The crow hopped down to pick it up with her beak, and then flew back to the rim of the jug. She opened her beak and let the pebble drop into the water, just as she had hoped. The weight of the pebble made the level of the water rise. The change was almost unnoticeable, but the crow was sure that this was the solution. With a little work and patience, she would finally be able to drink. The search for stones took time. If the pebble was too small, it would hardly make any difference to the water level. And if the pebble was too big, she would struggle to carry it in her beak. She would have to choose each stone carefully, one at a time, as the crow explored the garden and the surrounding fields. She felt herself sliding into a kind of trance. In the soft, dry heat of the late afternoon, her mind cleared. She forgot about her thirst and everything except her quest. It was a relaxing routine, searching in the bushes and secret corners of the garden to find the perfect pebble, and then bringing it back to the jug. Each time she dropped a stone and watched the water rise up ever so slightly, she was filled with a sense of deep satisfaction. And although she soon grew tired flying back and forth, she was never bored. With each stone and every journey, she found something new to notice and appreciate. Once, she was enchanted by a particular part of the garden, a bench in the shade, encircled by wonderfully scented bushes of lavender and thyme. In another moment, it was the color and shape of the stone that caught her imagination. It lay half hidden in the earth near the vines, and when she pulled it out, she saw that it was a pearly white and as smooth as if it had been shaped by the sea. But as the water in the jug rose higher and higher, it was the act of dropping the stone that gave her the most pleasure. Time seemed to slow down, almost to the point of standing still. She opened her beak to let the pebble fall, and she watched, mesmerized, as it tumbled down. The surface of the water rippled, then slowly became still again. The crow gazed at her reflection, and the growing collection of pebbles beneath it piled up like an underwater mountain. She paused for a moment, feeling happy with her progress and grateful for each and every stone. These were pebbles that others would have passed by without a second thought, but they were invaluable to her. The stones were easy to overlook, but the crow knew that sometimes it was these simple objects that made all the difference. When she built her nest, she often used material that other creatures ignored or discarded, like twigs or pieces of torn fabric. She understood the true value of everything in the world, no matter how ordinary it might appear. By the time the crow dropped the final pebble in the jug, it was dusk. There had once been a patch of shade from the magnolia tree covering the table, but now the entire garden was transformed by the evening shadows. The final rays of golden sunlight were visible on the walls of the house on the far side of the garden. It would soon be night and time for a deep, restful sleep. But first, she would relish this long-awaited drink. After the final pebble had settled in the jug, the crow leaned down and dipped her beak into the water. It was cool and delicious, and left her feeling refreshed after just a few sips. She imagined she could feel the water spreading right through her body like a deep breath. Now that she had quenched her thirst, she wanted nothing more than to rest. When she thought of taking flight once more and scanning the countryside for a suitable tree, she felt even more exhausted. She couldn't take to the skies again with such a tired, heavy head and such weary wings. Tomorrow, she would continue her search for a more permanent home, somewhere to build a nest for the coming months. But tonight, she would stay right here. It was safe, quiet, and peaceful, and there was plenty of water to drink the next morning. She gazed down into the jug, admiring the results of her hard work, and then the crow noticed that something else had become visible in the reflection. She could see not only the stones in the water and the mirror image of her head, but also the leaves of the tree above. The magnolia tree that had given her shade would also provide her with a place to sleep. When the wind moved the leaves, she could make out the faint reflection of a crescent moon. From this perspective, the moon looked like part of the magnolia, delicately balanced between the branches. The crow took one last sip from the jug and then fluttered up to the nearest branch. There were no other birds in the tree, and it felt like having a large, comfortable house all to herself. She could hear the sounds of distant birds and the hum of insects, as well as some far-away voices. Perhaps they were coming from inside the country house, but in that moment, it didn't really matter what the sounds were or where they were coming from. When the crow closed her eyes, the sounds seemed to fade and vanish in an instant. There was no need to pay attention to her surroundings or to think about anything at all. Her body knew just what to do to settle into a well-earned rest. Her head drooped down into her chest, and she gently arranged her wings into a comfortable position. And then, after just a few deep breaths, she was fast asleep, cradled by the branch of the magnolia tree.